The Andy Poland Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
On the 53-man roster, way to start, Andy. On the 53-man roster for the Washington Commanders, there are 7 receivers. We know who's number 1, Terry McLaurin. Who's number 2? Good question. We'll get to that coming up. Nationals bring up Dylan Cruz. You expect there to be an adjustment period? Oh, no. First career home run last night, 2 more hits. He looks like he's going to be the real deal there, and that is a wonderful thing for a team that is rebuilding. Orioles failed to take advantage of the Nationals' gift last night, and a crazy story involving Shohei Ohtani and the bobblehead. This is really out of control. We'll get to that and other things that are going on in the wide world of sports. So we had, 101 degrees yesterday at Reagan National Airport? 101 degrees in late August. We're almost into September. We've had some days that have almost resembled fall. And yesterday came out of, I don't want to say nowhere because they've been predicting this, but man, that was a jolt. Supposed to cool off today to about 90, and looking ahead in the 70s next week. Yep. Can smell fall in the air. Football, 1 week from Sunday. We all hunker down on Sunday afternoon into Sunday night and watch our usual, what will be, for months and months and months now, 11 hours of football if you stay up for the Sunday night game. Wild. We'll get to a little broadcast stuff, including Bill Belichick, who's going to be everywhere this year. Wouldn't say anything at news conferences for over 20 years, coaching both the Cleveland Browns and the New England Patriots. Now you won't be able to shut him up. And at 72, will he say enough to get himself back in the NFL as a coach? Maybe not. I mean, that has been the traditional ticket back to coaching, is to stay on the air and stay visible. But at his age and given the control that he might want, not so sure. So yesterday, the Commanders held a news conference with Adam Peters, the general manager, Dan Quinn, the coach. And this is the way it is supposed to work, that the general manager hires the coach and they work together. We haven't had that in ages. Look, even when we had Bruce Allen hired as the president of the team. He was not named general manager. He was named president. This was the end of the 2009 season, and everybody knew that Mike Shanahan was coming. And the word that was out was that Shanahan had told Dan Snyder, when I get the job, I want Bruce Allen to be the president. So they, kind of were like a package deal. In the case of the new ownership here, with what they've done so far, and the honeymoon period is very much on. They get a full pass on the 4-win season from last year because they didn't take over until a week before training camp. But they've done it the right way. They hired a general manager who hired a coach, and they work together, and they choose the roster, and we've got the 53. Is it a great 53? No. And a lot of question marks on it, the biggest one being Jaden Daniels. Is he going to be that guy? The hope is that he's become C.J. Stroud, and they have a team that's in the playoffs and looks like a strong team for years to come, but you just don't know. And by the way, of the first-round quarterbacks this year, here's the count. Caleb Williams will be the starter for the Bears. He got that in rookie minicamp. Jaden Daniels will be the starter for Washington. Wasn't named until, 2 weeks ago, less than that. Drake May did not get the starting job in New England. Jacoby Brissett, who was the backup here last year, beat him out. They apparently don't feel that May is ready to go, so he will sit for New England for a while. And Michael Penix, the most curious of the first-round picks, taken number 8 overall by Atlanta. They didn't even play him in the preseason. He will be the backup this year. In fact, that it looks like he may sit for a couple of years there, the way things are unfolding. J.J. McCarthy, picked 10 by Minnesota. A lot of people thought they got a steal. His name was being thrown up at the top of the draft board as we got closer to the draft. He lasted till 10, hurt his knee, out for the year. And then Bo Nix got the starting job with the Denver Broncos. So of the, 2, 4, 6 quarterbacks, we will have 3 of them starting 2 of them sitting and 1 of them out for the year on injured reserve. So Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Bo Nix will start. Drake May and Michael Penix will sit. And Taylor Heineke was, in case you missed this, was traded by Atlanta yesterday to the Chargers, where he will be a backup there. And I was told that Heineke accepted less money to stay in Atlanta because that's where he's from. And then they looked at Michael Penix and they said, I guess he's probably ready to be the backup. So they traded Heineke yesterday, and he goes to the Chargers. So there's that. So yesterday in Ashburn, Adam Peters and Dan Quinn held a joint news conference. And they talked about the 53-man roster and how it was chosen and some of the decisions and the practice squad and so forth. And the fact that even with the number 2 selection on the waiver wire, they chose to not take anybody, and this was Peters on why.
In the end, I think it really speaks to the guys we have in this building and looking through the waiver wire and being really happy with the guys that we have. And we thought, you compare them to the guys that you have and the guys that are out there, and we thought, the guys that we have in the building we're really happy with. So at this point, we didn't make any waiver claims, and we had the number 2 waiver claim. We still have the number 2 waiver claim, and we'll have that for the first 3 weeks at least, and hopefully no longer than that. And we'll keep doing that until we're always going to do what's best for the team and how to make our team better. So we didn't see that in this round, but it could be today, it could be tomorrow, it could be weeks from now.
Yeah, and look, Dan Quinn said last week as they were getting down to the 53, it's going to be fluid for a while and probably through the first week of the season. And with the number 2 waiver claim, that's going to be an advantage. They'll see who becomes available. A lot of teams are in this state of flux right now. We're still over a week away, 1 week away from opening night tonight when Baltimore plays at Kansas City, but the first Sunday is 9 days away. So there's going to be some movement back and forth and even through the first week because, again, if you are on a roster the first week of the season, your contract is guaranteed. So there's going to be a lot of guys signed after week 1 knowing that if it doesn't work out, you can cut them loose and doesn't cost you a lot of money. This was Peters on the receiving core. All this speculation, they're going to get Brandon Ayuk. They're going to get somebody who's unhappy. Jamar Chase doesn't have an extension in Cincinnati. They're going to get somebody. And they haven't gone out and traded for anybody yet. But this was Peters shortly before a move was made and was asked about the receiving room, as they call it now, and whether or not he's satisfied with what they have.
The guys that we have now are getting better and better each week, and not just the receiver room, but then you have 3 running backs that can catch the ball out of the backfield, and one who's a specialist at it, and Brian Robinson, who I think is underrated at that, and then Jeremy McNichols is a jack of all trades, and then you got the tight end room where we got 4 really good tight ends on the roster and a 5th one on the practice squad that can all catch the ball. So that group of eligible receivers we think is really good and have gelled really well with Jaden.
But shortly after that, it was announced that the Commanders had signed Noah Brown to a 1-year deal. Brown had been cut by the Houston Texans. Had a pretty decent year, 33 receptions last year, 567 yards and 2 touchdowns. And he had played with Terry McLaurin at Ohio State. He's 28 years old, so you're getting a little up there in age for receiver, but he may be able to give you a few good years there. And he goes into the mix. Now, you have 7 of the 53 who are wide receivers, but no real clear second option here. Terry McLaurin, number 1, obviously. But then you have De'Ami Brown, who was a big surprise in training camp. He looked like a guy who might not make the team. He seems to have the inside track for number 2. Luke McCaffrey, and he's probably going to play in 3 wide receiver sets. He's the guy that they drafted in the 3rd round out of Rice, former quarterback, making the transition. Seems to have great chemistry with Jaden Daniels. They get up early and they watch tape together at the park, so that's that. And then Olamide Zaccheaus, also from Philadelphia last year. So you have all these different options, and it's not really certain what they're going to do. They also have a couple of wide receivers on the practice squad. They got 15 of the 17 spots filled. Mitchell Tinsley, who was a late cut, and Bryson Tremaine, who's a big wide receiver and had a good look. He was brought back on the practice squad, and they still have a couple of spots open. So a lot of options at wide receiver, and the big splash and the Brandon Ayuk stuff that seems to still be swirling has not happened, and I would say doesn't look like it's going to happen unless, this Noah Brown thing is a smokescreen. But they did have to sign him to a 1-year contract. So I don't think it's going to happen, but you never know. There could be a surprise out of nowhere. All right, some baseball stuff, and Nationals have to be very, very pleased with the 3 young stars that they have. C.J. Abrams, who's been their starting shortstop all year. James Wood, who was called up a month and a half ago, continues to produce, and he had 3 steals last night. I mean, it was wild how the Nationals were able to run the bases. They had 5 steals last night, and 3 of them came from James Wood. It was just incredible what they were able to do, and they got career home run number 1 from Dylan Cruz, who was in the leadoff spot. And I wonder if they're thinking about leaving him there, because that might be a great spot for him. He can steal bases, he can run, and he can he plays the outfield very well. And I think that might be their best option there. Abrams has been in that spot, and maybe he's going to stay there. But with the power angle that you're looking for now in the leadoff spot, Cruz might be that guy. And since he's come up, he didn't get a hit in his first game. He got 2 hits in his second game the other night, and then last night 2 more, including the home run. And it looks like he's here to stay. And so Nationals do the Orioles a favor by beating the Yankees, but they can't take advantage of it as they lost last night to the Dodgers 6-4. They committed 3 errors in this game, which really hurt them. But the real story of this whole night was a bobblehead. Shohei Ohtani has a dog whose name is Decoy. And so they had made a bobblehead with Ohtani and the dog. And it's amazing that people are so crazed for these bobbleheads. They had announced that the first 40,000 for a stadium that holds close to 54,000, 40,000 would get the bobblehead of Ohtani holding Decoy. And 2,000 of those bobbleheads would be gold, boosting the demand, making them, a rare item there. People started lining up for this game at 9 o'clock in the morning. This was a 7 o'clock start, West Coast time. They're lining up at 9 a.m., 10 hours before the game. By 2:30, the line had become so long, the demand to enter so high that the parking gates were practically forced to open 2 hours before they normally would for a 7:10 start. It's just, and I saw this at Nats Park. I was a game where they were giving away bobbleheads, and people were walking in, taking the bobbleheads and going home. Just nuts. They drew 53,000 there. They got their bobbleheads, and they got another big night from Ohtani, who led off the first with his 42nd home run. He had also a steal, so he's got 41 steals and 42 home runs. And I actually picked up another steal later in the game, 42. So he's well on his way to being the first 50-50 player in baseball history. But the big story was the freaking bobblehead. It's just crazy how nuts these people are for the bobbleheads. And you figure when you're giving away 40,000 of them and people aren't throwing them away, how valuable can they be down the line? But I guess people trade them. They're going to show up on eBay. People are going to be demanding $200-$300 for them, I think. Who knows? Crazy. But the Dodgers did win the game, and the Orioles stay a game back. They close out the series tonight. We'll have coverage here starting at 9:30. The other baseball thing I want to throw in here, we spent some time talking about this off a Barry's Beluga column the other day when Juan Soto came to town with the Yankees, and Barry beating the drum to bring him back as a free agent no matter what it costs, because they got this young nucleus here, and you need that big bopper superstar, and no matter what it costs, you got to do it. Now, you already had Soto turn down $440 million from this team. Are they going to make another run at him? I think it's doubtful. But it does not appear that it's necessarily going to happen, though it could happen. But it does not appear that he's going to re-sign with the Yankees. And Michael Kay was on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday. Kay, the longtime television voice of the Yankees. And while he probably is interested in keeping the company line, he's telling Patrick that he's not so certain that Juan Soto will be back in pinstripes next year.
I'm one of the people who believe this, and I don't think it's something that people want to embrace. Everybody says, "Oh, he loves being a Yankee. and the fans love him and they're showing him such love, he'll definitely sign with the Yankees. He's definitely going to sign with the team that offers him the most money. I mean, you don't have Scott Boras as an agent to take a discount. That's just not the way it works. And maybe it's going to be the Yankees that give him the most money. The only thing I would actually bend a little bit on, Dan, is if it's close. I think he is enjoying his time. He knows the power of hitting in front of Judge. And the fans and Soto from opening day this year have had a love affair. So if there's a difference between $1 million for 1 year over a 10, 15-year period, I could see him saying, okay, I'll go to the Yankees. But let's say the Mets and Steve Cohen, they offer him $60 million a year, and the Yankees offer him $50. He could love the Yankees all he wants. He loved being with the Nationals, and he turned down $440 million. So I think it's going to come down to a business transaction, and I think emotions are going to be pushed to the side.
Yeah, I think that not only answers the Yankee question, it answers the Nationals question. It sounds like Steve Cohen is going to make sure that he gets Juan Soto. And this is a rare opportunity because you're not only purchasing one of the best in baseball, a likely future Hall of Famer, you're getting him at the age of 26. You know, that because he came up at the age of 19 with the Nationals, he's been able to run out his time, under team control. Now, he's been with 3 different teams. The Padres dealt for him. They realized they couldn't re-sign him. They ship him off to the Yankees. And even the Yankees, it sounds like, are balking at the idea of signing him. And part of it could be that they know that Steve Cohen is going to come with both barrels blazing. This would be enormous in 2 ways. One, you get a young superstar in Soto. And 2, you take him away from the Yankees. There's always that battle for the back page, as they call it, in New York. And if you can get the sizzle with the Mets that the Yankees usually get, you're going to take it. And what we saw with the Dodgers, and I think the Mets would be in this same type of scenario here, the Dodgers looked at the value of bringing in Shohei Ohtani and said, okay, we can handle $70 million a year. I think the Mets probably are in the same boat. It's a little bit different circumstance because of what Ohtani brings with the Japanese market and the international part of the whole picture here. But, Soto is a star. He's a superstar. And stays healthy. Knock wood. He really hasn't spent much time on the injured list. What you fear is a Mike Trout situation where you give a guy a pile of money and then he gets hurt all the time. But that hasn't been the case with him. So I think Kay is right there that it sounds more likely than anything that he's going to wind up with the Mets next year. The Mets will pay the freight to get Juan Soto, and they'll have that superstar that they can build around. It'd be nice to dream about him coming back to the Nats. That would be a wonderful story. But I don't think it's going to happen. All right, more from the roster for the Commanders. More comments from Adam Peters and also Dan Quinn on that. Plus, there's a quarterback decision. I want to say decision that was made in Pittsburgh by Mike Tomlin, and we'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Poland Show, ESPN 630. So Caleb Williams says he never gets nervous. Okay, we'll see. He's about to play his first NFL regular season game. Hard Knocks is wrapped up, and that was something that he said on Hard Knocks, that the only time he ever got nervous was before his first game at Gonzaga when he was a freshman. And ever since, he's been cool as a cucumber. We shall see about that. Tony and Mike weighing in on that on PTI last night. Mike Tomlin has his quarterback, Russell Wilson, who can set a couple of records this year that he does not want. We'll get to that and a whole lot more. And other things as we roll towards 11 o'clock. Bram Weinstein now at 11 o'clock here on ESPN 630. All right, so Adam Peters, the general manager, and Dan Quinn held a joint news conference yesterday and talked about the 53-man roster, which is indeed fluid. Adam Peters was asked about the wide receivers, and he said, oh, yeah, we're really happy with what they got. And then a little later on, we found out that they had signed Noah Brown, who had been released by the Houston Texans. Had a pretty decent year with them last year, caught 33 passes, played with Terry McLaurin at Ohio State. He'll be in the mix for number 2. This is an odd year that we don't know who the number 2 receiver is maybe De'Ami Brown, who was a big surprise in training camp, a guy who I thought might not make the team, and they really like him. But there's that. And then also John Ridgway was traded excuse me, was traded to the New Orleans Saints in a draft pick swap. Not a big move there, but that opens up the roster spot to do it. Then you have the practice squad, and the practice squad is now 17. I think at one time it was 7, but now it's 17. Used to be restrictions on how much you could have played in the NFL and still gotten the opportunity to be on a practice squad. I think if you had a full season of service, you couldn't be on it. Now it doesn't matter. There was some speculation that they were going to bring back Martavius Bryant, who had been signed in training camp. And I thought that Bryant was somebody that they wanted for the practice squad, and maybe that was the reason that they kicked the tires on him, because Dan Quinn had talked about this last year when he was the defensive coordinator with the Cowboys. Bryant was on the practice squad, and Quinn saw, the preparation in dealing with a guy 6'4", 200, and I guess he's a little heavier last year, but 210, 215, whatever he was. And now he thought, let's bring him in here, and even if he doesn't look like he's somebody who can make our team, we can use him on the practice squad. They did not. They did not bring him back. The 2 wide receivers that they signed, Mitchell Tinsley and Bryson Tremaine, who's also big, not as experienced as Bryant, but also hadn't been out of the league since 2018. Some other names that you'll recognize off the practice squad, Kaz Allen, who was a wide receiver, switched to running back, and they thought they might use him as a returner. Good to have a guy like that around just in case you have some injuries. Sam Hartman, as expected, the quarterback who they signed as a free agent out of Notre Dame, is back on the roster. Chris Rodriguez, a draft pick last year, and a guy I thought had some push. I thought he had a chance to make the team. He's on the practice squad as well. Cole Turner, tight end, drafted during the Rivera era, had some flashes. He's on there, as is Michael Wiley, a running back who played a lot in the preseason. So those are some of the names, and this was Peters yesterday on how he looks to put together a practice squad.
You're looking for a really good mix of guys that can come in and play for you, and that's one of the coolest things that. One of the only good things about COVID is that we're allowed to get a bigger practice squad because of the things that were happening then. And so that allows you to get 6 veteran players if you want on your practice squad, and then you can fill in the rest with younger guys. But so you have a mix of guys that can come in and sub in if you have a few injuries for a week or two, and then you have other guys where you can continue to develop. And like DQ says, even the veterans are still developing at that time. So you want to get guys that can help you right away, and then have another group of guys that can keep developing. So that's what we would look for, but you're always looking to get, the best 17 that you possibly can.
And once again, they only have 15 right now, so there are two spots open, and I'm sure they're keeping those open because they're waiting to see how things shake out as other rosters are fluid. Very fluid situation. They did not claim anybody off of waivers, even though they had the number 2 pick in that, and will continue to have that, but they just didn't see anybody that they like. So the only guy that they picked up after the waiver period passed is Noah Brown, who they signed yesterday from Houston. They got a couple of undrafted free agents making the 53, and as Quinn says, that's partly by design for identity.
You better have an identity and know what you're going to be about and how you get down, because if you don't, you'll just kind of hodgepodge it around. And so I think you see us play, you've got a glimpse so far of some of speed, of physicality, of going to finish. And so those are some of the traits that we admire about a lot of the players on this 70-man roster. And the more we do it, the stronger it's going to get. But that is a really important piece of it.
Yeah, and then you get to this about the record. And unlike most years or years past with Dan Snyder, where they were never rebuilding. And even Dan Quinn, when he was hired, was recalibrating, which they really have because they have completely overhauled this roster. This was the roster that Adam Peters looked at, and he was asked about in his opening news conference and had a 3.5-second pause when he was asked about what he thought of the roster. And we saw over the next few months what he thought of the roster as he brought in 20 different free agents. And then with what they did in the draft and undrafted free agents, they have totally over. I mean, anybody whose name isn't Jonathan Allen or Terry McLaurin or even Jaden Daniels, who is new, was subject to being released, replaced, whatever. So it's a completely different roster. How good this team is going to be, we heard the other day with the owner of the team, Josh Harris, saying it's got to be a lot better than last year when they won 4 games, but he's not making any predictions as to what the win total is going to be. And one of the things that Peter said yesterday about, especially with the practice squad, he says, we're not collecting talent, we're building a team. And they're looking at the long haul. And if this is not a playoff year, they're not going to be too worried about that. That's not what they're looking to build a team that can be competitive for a while and maybe 2 and 3 years down the road, maybe even be able to compete for division titles, for maybe a deep run in the playoffs, and at some point compete for a Super Bowl. So this was Quinn yesterday when asked about how you balance wanting to win now, but also looking down the road and the organization that you want to be.
The win now is not way down the line. It's not this, the end of the season, and I get that's what a lot of people want to do. But I think we'll miss everything if we do that and look to what's down the line as opposed to how do we just go and keep attacking it, keep getting better. It's our division, all of that. And so if we do what we're capable of doing and play the way that we want to play, we'll be really proud of those results. But to say where it's going to be so far down the line, not interested in that. Just want to see how good we can get and then do it again and do it again. And if we do those over and over, there'll be some really cool things that'll come from that.
And you can hear those kind of things from first-year coaches everywhere. I mean, there are certain circumstances where a coach comes in and the team has been good and the coach maybe retires, although that doesn't happen anymore. But he's moved on to someplace else and he's taken over a team. And we've had situations where if you go back to Bill Walsh when he stepped down, they won the Super Bowl 2 years later. Next year, he had built the team. So this is a total overhaul. He doesn't really know how things are going to gel. He's not making any predictions. And I think they'll have an idea whether they have a quarterback probably halfway through the season. It's not. I don't think it's going to. All the great things that you're hearing about Jaden Daniels, pump your brakes because he has not faced real competition in real games yet. Everything you've heard about him has been great. He has looked great, but right now we don't know. He's going to be a starter this year. Caleb Williams is going to be a starter his first game as a rookie. Drake May is not. He lost out to Jacoby Brissett. That was announced today by Bill Belichick. And J.J. McCarthy out for the year with the Minnesota Vikings, hurt his knee. And Bo Nix, who was drafted number 12 by the Broncos, is going to be their starting quarterback. So of the 6 quarterbacks that we saw in the first round, Michael Penix being another, there's only going to be 3 that are going to be starting, only 3 that are going to open the season as the starting quarterback. And, of course, the first to get that honor was Caleb Williams, as he was named the starter in rookie minicamp. And if you saw Hard Knocks, he said, I never get nervous before any game. Hasn't happened since I was a freshman in high school. So Tony and Mike took a look at that yesterday on PTI. Wilbon, of course, an enormous Bears fan, and this was their take on what they heard from Williams.
Williams said in Hard Knocks that he hasn't been nervous for a football game since his first game in high school. But Chiefs wide receiver McCole Hardman said to Williams before their teams played last week, and I quote, "You might have lied when you said you don't get nervous. Your first game in the NFL, you're going to be nervous," unquote. Wilbon, you're totally invested in Williams. Do you think he'll feel nervous for next week's opening game?
Yes, I do, but I take his word if he doesn't, and I don't care. I don't care. I've learned, just like you learned some years ago when you had a teenager and somebody who was approaching Caleb Williams' age in your house, I have that now. I've learned not to listen to anything they say because it doesn't relate to me. The language, the context, and then none of it has anything to do with anything these ears understand. So I don't care. I love Caleb Williams. as long as he doesn't play nervous. Now, I heard this because I'm watching Hard Knocks. We're going to get to something else in a second because there's a real story in Hard Knocks about a young man named Ian Wheeler from Howard University who's accepted to medical school and got hurt and is done for the year, and that's what I care about. But Caleb Williams, Tony, I want him to go out there and just make strides, improve. I'm not expecting him to be great, Hall of Fame great right away. I don't care if he's nervous or not nervous. Just don't play nervous if that's not too much to request.
So I can't speak to Caleb Williams' nervous system. You know me a long time. I get nervous about everything. There's nothing in life that doesn't make me nervous. If I am not, even after all these years, I'm still nervous sitting in the chair doing this show. If I'm not nervous, I feel something is wrong. Me personally, I welcome being nervous because it allows me to concentrate more. I'm sure there are people I wouldn't want to be nervous. I don't think it's good for an F-15 test pilot to be nervous. I don't want my surgeon to be nervous if he's going to do a hernia operation on me in 15 minutes. But if Caleb, you know what, if Caleb Williams isn't nervous, that's fine. I will say this, Mike. Dylan Cruz has been up for a couple of days with the Washington Nationals playing right field, first time in the majors. He got it against the Yankees, no less. He got a hit last night, a couple of hits last night. And after the game, he said, I just want to sit down. I want to breathe a little bit. I want to soak it all in. So maybe he's not nervous, but there's recognition there that there's extra adrenaline in certain things. And I think that's what Caleb Williams has to feel, extra adrenaline, don't you?
You would think, Tony, I'm going to be nervous at Soldier Field on September 8th at noon Central Time when they kick it off against Tennessee. So I will have all the butterflies. They can just transfer from Caleb Williams to me. But again, I said I was going to mention this. Ian Wheeler, remember the name, Tony. Howard University, so we care about that. It's down the street from both of us. This kid looked like he was going to make the team, an undrafted free agent. And he tore up his knee in the last preseason game, and it kills me. I never met the kid. I root for him. It kills me. And he hugged his mother, and there was an embrace that Hard Knocks did, and they just stayed on the embrace for like, I don't know, it seemed like 2 or 3 full minutes. And I root for this kid now as hard as I root for anybody who's on that roster. The Bears are going to keep him on. It's like a redshirt year. I hope something happens good with him. But that is the whole story for Hard Knocks to me. The rest of it's fluff. The rest of it's fine. It's football. It doesn't matter. It's real life for a kid trying to make a team who could have gone to medical school. That is what I care about. I'm nervous for him.
Yeah, that's a cool story, and that was outlined very well in Hard Knocks. But yeah, we'll see about Caleb Williams. And I was interested to hear the other day where we had Jordan Palmer, who was once drafted by the Redskins, talking about Caleb Williams and how his entry into the NFL could put him in a better spot than Patrick Mahomes was. You know, Mahomes played at Texas Tech. They weren't great. They had some great shootout games. He was good enough to be drafted in the first round, but nobody was really paying a great deal of attention to him when he was drafted by the Chiefs, a good team who they knew they were going to have Alex Smith as the starter even when they drafted Mahomes in the first round. Caleb Williams, different story. He's played in big games. They didn't have the NIL when Mahomes played. So here's Caleb Williams, who's been living in a luxury apartment in Los Angeles, already used to making big money, not quite the money that he makes now, but plenty of money. and so it's going to be a different step for him than it was for Patrick Mahomes, which may indicate that the ceiling could possibly be higher for him. That's not to say that Caleb Williams is going to be better than Patrick Mahomes, but the Mahomes rookie is a different look from the Williams rookie, and he's going to a team that is so desperate for a quarterback. I mean, Kansas City, they had good quarterback play from Alex Smith. He was very, very good for them, and they had some pretty good play in years past, and going back to Len Dawson when he led them to the Super Bowl championship. The Bears, they didn't have anybody. You know, I had to go back to Sid Luckman in the 1940s to find a marquee quarterback. I mean, even Jim McMahon, he benefited from maybe the greatest defense that there ever was, plus Walter Payton. He was good, not great. So Williams is on one hand, he's walking in with the pressure to be the savior. On the other hand, he's better prepared to do this because he's been in the spotlight for so long. You know, coming off the bench as a freshman to replace Spencer Rattler, who was a Heisman Trophy candidate, and beating Texas in the Red River Shootout, and then going on to keep the starting job the rest of the year, then going to USC with his coach and playing 2 years and winning the Heisman Trophy and all those things. That wasn't Patrick Mahomes coming in. Now, he's got a long way to go because Mahomes has already got 3 Super Bowl championships. But the interesting look at the two of them by Jordan Palmer, I thought really was insightful when he was on the Dan Patrick Show the other day. Coming up, the Yankees were once owned by CBS. This move by the NFL could be really groundbreaking, and could we have a team that's, say, owned by AT&T or Exxon or who knows? We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
So what's this world come to where there's cheating in the Paralympics? Big story in the Post yesterday, which I'll go through it at 10:45 as we roll through till 11 o'clock when Bram Weinstein does his show, and I'm sure he'll have some more thoughts on the comments yesterday from Adam Peters and Dan Quinn on the roster being at 53 and the movement back and forth and the moves that are likely to come and whether they're going to have a number 2 receiver, whether that's going to be decided in practice next week. Who knows? A lot of questions about the team. Meantime, a couple of things NFL-wise. One of them Commanders related, but the other league-wide. And this may not be something you're aware of, but when George Steinbrenner bought the Yankees in 1973, he paid $10 million for the team, which is now easily worth over $10 billion. And if they went up for sale, who knows how high the price would go. It may go to $15 billion, maybe $20 billion. You never know. But when he bought the team, it was $10 million. And CBS had bought it years before for $13 million, so they took a loss on it. Two things. One, baseball team now isn't going to sell for less than it sold years before, even if it's like 1 year before. And number two, CBS owning a baseball team. We have ownership situations in sports, which, sometimes it's various partners. Even Josh Harris has a major partner in Mitch Rales, and also Josh Hine and Magic Johnson is a partner. He's got a bunch of others. But aside from the Packers, which are publicly owned, it's pretty much individuals. Well, the NFL realizes that it's bumping its head on what anybody can pay outside of Jeff Bezos. So they now have a circumstance where they're allowing teams to have up to 10% in investment groups that are, private equity firms who are looking to invest in NFL teams. This is just the beginning, but they're trying to keep the revenue up. Their goal is $25 billion a year, and they're almost there, and they're realizing, okay, the next time a team goes up for sale, if Bezos isn't bidding on it, if he doesn't want to buy it, how many people can actually do that? So now you're having private equity money. How long before we go back to a time when, like, CBS owned the Yankees? Could we have, AT&T buy a team? A major bank? Could PNC Bank buy a team? I mean, all these things have to be thought of because this is where we are going. And individuals, it's a wonderful thing for the NFL, but individuals just don't have that kind of money. When Dan Snyder bought the Redskins for $800 million, that was a record price, and he had partners that were involved in that, and then they were able to get that done, but that was still an individual who was heavily leveraged. That doesn't happen anymore, and you got to have the cash to do it. So I'm going to be interested to see where this goes. This could be just the beginning of it, that we could see a time when teams are owned by corporations. I don't think that's out of the question. Tom Lovero's got a column today about Josh Harris and the news conference that he had the other day. This was on Sunday before they played their preseason finale against the New England Patriots, and I was very impressed after not seeing anything from Dan Snyder for 25 years, that an owner actually sat up there and took questions and seemingly answered them honestly about where they are. And two big things. One was the name, where he's pretty much acknowledging that the fan base doesn't like the name. They can't go back to the old name. He's right about that. But he says we got to start winning football games. And, he's got a spruced up stadium to some degree. So, maybe if this is a really good season and people feel better about going to the games where they don't have sewage dumped on their heads and railings collapse and things like that, maybe the name thing gets pushed into the background. But it's still there, and he's got to deal with that. And then the big thing is the stadium issue. Is he going to be able to build the stadium in D.C.? And one of the things that Harris said was they've got to wait till after the election because that's what everybody's tied up in, and we'll see where the RFK bill goes. That's the one where they would change the terms of the lease, extend it for 99 years, and allow for commercial property to be built or commercial businesses to exist alongside the stadium, which is not the case now. But that's a long way away, and as Lavero points out, the district is spending $500,000 to see if they can find a way to help pay for a $2 billion stadium. So, it seems to me you could get a number cruncher for less than that to figure out if you can come up with cash to help out to build a stadium. But that's where that stands right now. And so what Lavero says, and I think a lot of people are feeling this way, that maybe the path of least resistance is to build a new stadium right next to what is now called Northwest Stadium. They own the land right there. They could start construction on that tomorrow if they wanted to, and maybe just make it happen there. Now, Harris did say at the news conference that 2030 is a realistic date. I think that would be more a target for the RFK site. If they decide to go ahead with Maryland, nothing stops them from putting a shovel in the ground tomorrow. That could happen. He also talked about, and Lavero covers this as well, that they are efforting to get the draft in D.C., how cool it would be down on the Mall. It's committed for the next 2 years. I think it's in Green Bay this year and Pittsburgh next year. What Tom says is that the Ravens are also interested. Sashi Brown, the team president, said in March, we've begun talks with the NFL. The draft has become such a major tentpole event for the league. A lot of cities are interested. We think Baltimore is a great venue for it. Yeah, they could have it right down on the harbor. And then what Tom says is that sources say once the Ravens are finished with their $600 million in renovations to M&T Bank Stadium, they are hoping to host the draft in the next available open date, which is 2027. He says it's very unlikely the NFL will bring the draft to two cities so close to each other without some time to pass, at least 10 years. So what he's saying is if Baltimore gets the draft in 2027, don't expect it to see it until 2037 in Washington. He says, would the league bypass owner Steve Bisciotti in the club for 20 years from now in favor 20 years now. In other words, Bisciotti's on the team for 20 years in favor of the new guy. It's not so easy. So, that's kind of what Tom does is he sometimes throws cold water on a lot of excitement about these things, but that is reality. That's a reality that he's dealing with. Announcement yesterday from Pittsburgh Steelers coach Mike Tomlin that he is going to go with Russell Wilson this year, explaining it yesterday on the Rich Eisen Show.
It's been a challenging and good experience for me and for us, to be quite honest with you. Going through it and really as we got into camp and really got competitive, it became evident that the decision was going to be difficult. Justin's talents are more than I anticipated, particularly his mobility, the things that he can do and create. That was really exciting. Russ's deep ball is even more impressive than his reputation, and I've seen it for 10 plus years or more toward 15 years in the National Football League. To be around it every day, it was really exciting. And I think that those are two examples about what made it challenging. It was challenging because of the things that they're capable of doing and how they conducted themselves in a positive way, as opposed to being challenging because of the things that they lack. Sometimes you're dealing with two candidates, man, and you're choosing the best of two unattractive options, if you will. It became very evident early in this process that it wasn't going to be that. And when you're in my position, man, that's a good problem. We had two capable guys, two guys that we're excited about their skill sets, two guys that we're excited about how they conduct themselves as professionals and as men. And it played out in that way. And so I'm really comfortable.
How much did Russ's resume and also his years of being a veteran put a thumb on the scale here for you?
I think I think it does, but I think it does in terms of him, not in terms of the decision maker. I don't think that you can have the experiences that he's had and it not show in how you play. The moments can't be too big for a guy that's been at it as long as he has and has seen the things that he's seen. He's had that confetti rain down on him. It's not speculation. It's not dreaming for him. He's lived it. And I think that when you experience things in this game, be it a player or a coach, a quarterback or a head coach, I just think it's benefit in having lived and have seen it. And certainly the high floor component of it puts you at ease from a decision maker standpoint. But I think the real significant advantage of his resume is probably in him.
And do you have conversations with him about where he wants to go to fill out his resume here? I mean, we don't have to have our heads in the sand here. You know, there's a place in Canton that he had a charted course for with his years in Seattle. And this opportunity, certainly for your vaunted franchise and fan base, for him to succeed with you here, he can put himself back on that track. Do you have those conversations with him openly with this opportunity?
Certainly. And it was a real component of us getting to know one another. To be quite honest with you, man, I want to be around guys that are driven. I fear satisfaction. And so, like, that was the first question that I had. Guys like him aren't hungry. Hunger has been met. You better be driven. You better be in search of something, and he is. And I quickly got comfortable with that understanding as I've gotten to know him.
How much of that conversation are you willing to share with me right now, Coach? Man,
we can talk about, Rich, whatever you want to talk about.
No, because I'm fascinated by it, because it's serious. Like this is his livelihood and his legacy. Like, this is a legacy question we have right here.
I think for me, it may have come from me first. Like, what's your motivation? What drives you? What brings you here? What are you trying to get done here? I don't have time to beat around the bush in terms of getting to know him professionally or getting to know any of these guys professionally. I just think in order to lead somebody, man, you got to kind of understand what motivates them, what drives them, where they're at in the short term and the long term. And so those are some questions that I got to immediately in our first conversation, and he was not resistant to them at all. His answers, quite frankly, were music to my ears. He talked about a guy whose better days lie ahead, who's excited about the challenges that lie ahead as opposed to his resume. That resonates with me. I can relate to that. I don't care about my resume and the ground that I've covered. I'm excited about 2024, and he made that really evident that he is as well.
All that said, and again, I don't mean to telegraph anything to your friend Raheem Morris, who you're seeing in a couple Sundays from now. Is there a Justin Fields package still, do you think?
Hey, my friend Raheem Morris better be ready for a Justin Fields package. I'll just say that.
Yeah, it doesn't mean he's going to do it, but Justin Fields losing out to Russell Wilson, who really didn't have a bad year statistically last year. Completed 66% of his passes for over 3,000 yards, 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. That's not that bad, but Mike Tomlin will be his fourth coach over the last 3 years, right? He spent a year in Seattle, spent 2 years in Denver with 2 different coaches, and now he's with Mike Tomlin, who had unbelievable stability for most of his run in Pittsburgh with Ben Roethlisberger, and like a lot of situations like that where you're trying to replace a guy who's been there for a long time, you go through different quarterbacks trying to find the right one, and Kenny Pickett didn't work out, and so now they're on to Russell Wilson. Now, there's a couple of numbers that Wilson probably are unavoidable for this year. Record for most sacks taken. Tom Brady holds that. He was sacked 565 times, but Brady played 23 years. Wilson could actually break that this year, and he's played 10 fewer years. He's going into his 13th year, and through his first 12 years, he's been sacked an average of 43.9 times per season. So if he hits that average this year, he would set the record for most sacks taken, 570.9. It would not only top what Brady had with 565, but it would top the unofficial record of Fran Tarkenton. Now, when Tarkenton played, they didn't keep track of sacks. It did not become an official stat until 1982, and that was after he left the league. But I guess, through looking through all the tape and so forth, they were able to determine that he was sacked 570 times. If you remember, Fran Tarkenton was a scrambler. He ran around looking to make a play, and sooner or later somebody would tackle him, and it was a little bit different on how you can handle the quarterbacks in those days. So anyway, there's that. There's this sack record, and there's also this, that Russell Wilson could become the first quarterback in NFL history to lose to 31 different teams. He has lost to 29 teams, but that could reach 31 in the upcoming season. He's never lost to the Browns or the Eagles. The Steelers are playing both of those. They play the Browns in Week 12 and Week 14. They face the Eagles. So before Christmas, he could set the record on that. So that's on the menu there for Russell Wilson as he becomes the starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then this story out of New York, and it reminded me of this, that of all the sports figures in the history of Washington, D.C., and, some of them go back to the early 1900s with Walter Johnson, that we certainly remember Walter Johnson and Sammy Baugh, who came along. Well, there's only one other coach in Washington football history that's won an NFL championship besides Joe Gibbs, who won 3, and that was Ray Flaherty. Ray Flaherty won the first 2 titles that Washington had in 1937 and 1942. And to tell you what a different era that was, right after they won the championship in 1942, Ray Flaherty resigned to go be a naval officer, helped to fight World War II, which he did, and then after the war came back and coached again in the NFL, but didn't have the success that he had here. But when we talk about great figures in Washington, D.C. sports history, almost nobody brings up Ray Flaherty. And Ray Flaherty, whether he benefited from having this great quarterback in Sammy Baugh or not, he was a good enough coach to get into the Hall of Fame in 1976. He died at the age of 90 in 1994. But I didn't know this until I saw what happened with the Giants yesterday, that their rookie wide receiver is going to wear number 1, Malik Neighbors, and that the number 1 not only had been retired by the Giants for Ray Flaherty as a player, it was the first number retired in pro football history. That never before had they retired a number in football, and it was retired for Ray Flaherty because he was that good. He played for the Giants, joined them in 1929, and after 2 years as the Gonzaga coach, returned from 1931 to 1935, became a professional coach and is credited with the behind-the-line screen pass and the 2-platoon system. You guys used to play both ways, right? Sammy Baugh was a great defensive back as well as a quarterback, and he was the one who came up with the 2-platoon system, which doesn't seem that revolutionary, but okay, he did that. So anyway, the number had been retired, and Malik Neighbors, who wore number 8 at LSU, couldn't wear that for the Giants since Daniel Jones wears that. He wore number 9, and he wanted to switch to number 1, and he found out that's retired. The Flaherty family was contacted, and they said, yeah, that's okay. If I were part of the Flaherty family, I would definitely want that to be back in use so people would recognize that Ray Flaherty was a great player with the Giants. I don't think, when you talk about the great Giants in history, going back to, Charlie Connerly, they've had, the various guys, Joe Morris, we mentioned Fran Tarkenton played with them briefly. They had some great players over the years, and Ray Flaherty is never mentioned. So a cool thing for 2 cities, one for us, for D.C., that we had a coach he came from Boston with them, started coaching in 1936, coached through 1942, won 2 championships, a forgotten figure who gets recognized now that his number comes out of retirement for the Giants. That's a nice thing. All right, we got the Orioles playing again tonight against the Dodgers, 9:30 coverage here on ESPN 630. Bram Weinstein now at 11 o'clock. Tony Kornheiser now at 2 o'clock, and I'm still in my same old spot, which means I'll see you back here tomorrow at 9 a.m.